Imagine watching your family die. Now imagine watching them die again, and again, and again. What if every time you tried to save them, the universe found another way to take them from you? What if time itself was the cruelest prison imaginable? The 10 cases you're about to hear are not science fiction. They are documented accounts of time travelers who were forced to witness the same unbearable tragedy across every single timeline. Let's begin. Number 10. The father who buried his daughter 47 times. Imagine loving someone so much that you would tear apart the fabric of reality itself just to save them. Now, imagine failing. Not once, not twice, 47 times. That is exactly what happened to a man named Marcus Hale. And his story is absolutely heartbreaking. Marcus Hale was a quantum physicist working at a private research laboratory in Boulder, Colorado. He was brilliant, respected, and by all accounts, completely devoted to his 7-year-old daughter, Emily. She was his entire world. On September 14th, 1987, that world was destroyed. Emily was walking home from a friend's house when a drunk driver ran a red light and struck her. She died instantly. Marcus arrived at the scene 20 minutes later. He held her body in the street and screamed until his voice gave out. Most people would eventually learn to live with such a tragedy. Marcus Hale refused. Over the next 11 years, he became obsessed with a single idea. What if he could go back? What if he could save her? He poured every resource he had into developing what he called a localized time displacement device. His colleagues thought he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. But in 1998, he succeeded. Marcus traveled back to September 14th, 1987. He arrived 3 hours before the accident. His hands were shaking as he walked to the intersection and physically stopped Emily from crossing that street. He watched the drunk driver speed past. Emily was alive. He had done it. That night, Marcus held his daughter and wept with joy. But the next morning, Emily complained of a headache. Within hours, she collapsed. An undiagnosed brain aneurysm. She died in the hospital before sunset. Marcus was devastated, but he did not give up. He jumped back again. This time, he took Emily to a doctor immediately and had her fully examined. The aneurysm was found and treated. She survived. For 6 days, Marcus watched her laugh and play, believing he had finally broken the cycle. Then she drowned in a neighbor's backyard pool during a birthday party. A freak accident. No one saw her slip under the water. Marcus jumped back again, and again, and again. 47 times in total. He documented every attempt in journals filled with meticulous detail. House fire, choking incident, sudden cardiac arrest, allergic reaction, lightning strike, car accident on a different street, fall from a tree. Every single time, no matter what Marcus changed, Emily died within 72 hours of September 14th, 1987. The universe found a way. It always found a way. In his journals, Marcus developed a theory he called convergence. He believed that certain deaths are fixed points in time, immovable, unchangeable. No matter how many branches of possibility you explore, the outcome remains the same. Emily's death was not an event. It was a law. And Marcus spent 32 years trying to break a law that could not be broken. His final journal entry is haunting. It reads simply, "I have accepted that September 14th, 1987 is not a date. It is a wall, and I have thrown myself against it until there is nothing left of me." Marcus Hale disappeared in 2019. His journals were discovered in an abandoned storage unit in Nevada. But here is the detail that makes this case truly chilling. On the very last page, Marcus wrote something different, something that suggests his final attempt was not like the others. He wrote, "I think she knows. She looked at me differently this time, like she remembered." What does that mean? Did Emily somehow become aware of the loops? Did she recognize her father from a previous timeline? Was she conscious of dying over and over again? The thought is almost too horrifying to consider. A little girl trapped in an endless cycle of death, watching her father fail to save her every single time. Marcus Hale wanted to be a hero. Instead, he became a prisoner of his own love. And somewhere, in a storage unit in the Nevada desert, 47 versions of the same tragedy sit, waiting to be understood. What happens when a father realizes that saving his daughter was never an option? That time itself had already decided. Number 9, the soldier who watched his brother die in every war. What if you could live your life over and over again? Sounds like a dream, right? Now imagine that every single time you lived, you watched your brother die. Different decade, different country, different war, but the same ending, the same loss, the same helpless grief. That is the nightmare Viktor Andreev claims he endured for over 30 lifetimes. Viktor Andreev first appears in Soviet psychiatric records from 1952. He was classified as suffering from severe temporal delusions and confined to a facility outside Moscow. But the details of his case were so disturbing that his file was sealed for decades. When researchers finally gained access in the 1990s, what they found was almost impossible to believe. Viktor claimed that he had lived his entire life more than 30 times. Each time he died of old age, he would wake up again as a young boy in the same family, in the same village, with the same younger brother named Alexei. And each time, no matter what Viktor did, Alexei died in a war. In the original timeline, the year was 1916. Viktor and Alexei were soldiers fighting in the trenches of World War I. Viktor watched his brother take a bullet to the chest during an artillery barrage. Alexei died in his arms, choking on blood, whispering Viktor's name. When Viktor finally died decades later, he expected nothing but darkness. Instead, he woke up as a child again. And Alexei was alive. At first, Viktor was overjoyed. He had been given another chance. This time, he swore he would keep Alexei away from war. He convinced his brother to avoid military service entirely, but the Russian Revolution erupted. Alexei joined the Red Army to protect their village. He died at Stalingrad in 1943, frozen in the snow, eyes open, staring at nothing. Viktor reset again. This time, he convinced his family to emigrate to America before the wars began. Alexei grew up in New York. He became a teacher. He was safe. Then the Vietnam draft notice arrived. Alexei died in the Mekong Delta, stepping on a landmine during a routine patrol. Again and again, Viktor tried. He moved Alexei to France. French Indochina claimed him. He kept Alexei home in a remote village. A local militia conflict killed him during a raid. He sent Alexei to South America. A military coup put a rifle in his hands. Every timeline, every decade, every continent. War found Alexei. It always found him. Viktor documented 37 deaths in total. He wrote in his psychiatric evaluation, "I have watched him fall 37 times. I know the exact expression his face makes, the way his eyes go wide, the way his mouth opens but no sound comes out. I see it every time I close my eyes." Viktor developed a theory to explain the horror. He believed Alexei was what he called a temporal anchor, a soul bound to violent death across every possible timeline. Some people, Viktor claimed, are fixed points of tragedy. No matter how many branches of reality you explore, their fate remains the same. Alexei was born to die in war, and Viktor was cursed to witness it. Soviet scientists studied Viktor briefly before dismissing him as insane. He spent the rest of his life in care facilities, growing older, waiting for the reset he knew would come. In 2003, Viktor Andreev died in a Moscow hospital. He was 91 years old. His last words to the attending nurse were, "I'm going back. I have to try again." His heart stopped. The monitors flatlined. But 4 minutes later, something impossible happened. His heart started beating again. Viktor opened his eyes, looked directly at the nurse, and spoke one final sentence. "He's already dead. I arrived too late again." Then he closed his eyes. His heart stopped permanently. The nurse filed a report that was quietly buried. If Viktor Andreev truly reset every time he died, then he is not gone. He is out there right now, a child somewhere in the world, with a younger brother he loves more than anything. A brother who is already walking toward a war that has not yet begun. And Viktor will watch him die. Again. Number 8. The woman trapped in her wedding day. Imagine the happiest day of your life. The sun is shining. The flowers are perfect. The person you love most in the world is standing across from you, smiling, ready to spend forever by your side. Now imagine watching them die, and then waking up to live that same day again. And again, and again, over 200 times. That is the prison Elise Marchetti has been living in since 2011. June 18, 2011 was supposed to be perfect. Elise and her fiancé David had chosen a historic villa in Tuscany for their wedding. Rolling hills, ancient stone walls, a decorative balcony overlooking the vineyard where guests would gather for the reception. Everything was exactly as they had dreamed. The ceremony was beautiful. Elise remembers the way David's voice cracked when he said his vows. She remembers thinking she had never been so happy. Then, at exactly 8:22 p.m., the balcony collapsed. The ancient stone gave way without warning. David and 3 guests fell 15 feet onto jagged rocks below. Elise watched her husband die on their wedding night, his white shirt turning red, his eyes finding hers one last time before they went empty. She screamed his name until debris struck her head and everything went black. Elise was in a coma for 3 weeks. When she finally woke up, she told the doctors something that made no sense. She said she had already lived through the accident, not once, dozens of times. She described waking up on the morning of June 18th over and over again. The same sunlight through the window, the same smell of coffee, the same nervous excitement in her stomach. And every single time, no matter what she did, David died at 8:22 p.m. The loop, she explained, lasted exactly 14 hours and 22 minutes, from 6 a.m. until the moment of his death. She had tried everything to break it. She moved the reception indoors. A chandelier fell and crushed him. She postponed the wedding entirely. They were killed in a car accident on the way to reschedule. She warned David directly, begging him to stay away from the villa. He laughed and told her she was being paranoid. He died anyway. Different cause, same time, same ending. Neurologists who examined Elise found something extraordinary. Her brain scans showed unprecedented activity in the temporal lobe, the region associated with memory and the perception of time. One doctor wrote in his notes that her neural patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen. It was as if her brain was processing multiple timelines simultaneously. Elise developed her own theory. She believed the coma had opened what she called a temporal fracture. Her consciousness had become unstuck, spreading across hundreds of branching realities, all converging on the same fixed point. David's death at 8:22 p.m. on June 18, 2011. She was not remembering the loops. She was living them, all of them, at once. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Elise carried over 200 sets of memories of watching her husband die. Poisoning, fire, heart attack, choking, structural collapse. Each death slightly different, each one equally devastating. In one interview, she said something that still haunts researchers who studied her case. "I've learned that love doesn't protect you. Time uses the things you love against you." But the most chilling moment came during a filmed session in 2013. Elise was mid-sentence when she suddenly stopped talking. Her eyes drifted to the clock on the wall. Her face went pale. Then she stood up abruptly and said, "It's 8:21. I have to go. He's about to die again." She walked out of the room. The interview was never completed. Elise Marchetti has not spoken publicly since 2014. Her family refuses to comment. Some researchers believe she finally escaped the loop, that whatever fracture existed in her mind eventually healed. Others believe something far more disturbing, that Elise is still inside the loop right now, still waking up on the morning of June 18th, still watching David smile at her across the altar, still counting down the hours until 8:22 p.m. If that is true, then Elise Marchetti is not living a life. She is serving a sentence, 14 hours and 22 minutes, forever. Number 7, the twin who killed his brother across every timeline. What would you do to save the person you love most? Now imagine discovering that every time you try to save them, you become the reason they die. Not a bystander, not a witness, the cause. That is the unbearable truth James Whitmore discovered about himself and his twin brother Michael, and it destroyed him. James and Michael Whitmore were born in Portland, Oregon in 1976. They were identical twins, inseparable from the moment they entered the world. They shared everything: clothes, friends, secrets. People who knew them said they seemed to communicate without speaking, finishing each other's sentences, knowing what the other was thinking before a word was said. James once described Michael as the other half of his soul. In 1994, that soul was torn apart. the brothers went hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, a trail they had walked dozens of times before. But on that day, James lost his footing near a narrow ridge. He stumbled, his arm swung out instinctively, and his hand struck Michael square in the chest. Michael fell backward over the edge. He dropped 40 feet onto jagged rocks below. James climbed down screaming his brother's name, but Michael was already gone, eyes open, blood pooling beneath his head. James held his brother's body and howled until park rangers found him 3 hours later. The death was ruled an accident, but James could not accept it. He became obsessed with the idea of going back, of fixing what he had done. Through contacts in fringe scientific communities, he found a researcher experimenting with neurofeedback technology that allegedly allowed consciousness to fold back through time. James volunteered immediately, and somehow, impossibly, it worked. James found himself back on the morning of the hike. His heart was pounding. This time, he told Michael he was feeling sick. He convinced his brother to stay home. The hike never happened. James wept with relief. But 2 days later, Michael went hiking with friends instead. He slipped on the same trail. Another hiker lost their balance and bumped into him. Michael fell from the same ridge. He died on the same rocks. James folded back again. This time, he canceled the trip entirely and drove Michael to the coast instead. On the way home, a truck ran a red light. James was driving, he survived. Michael did not. James went back again. He planned a quiet weekend at home. A house fire broke out. James had forgotten to check the smoke detector batteries. Michael died of smoke inhalation. 12 times James traveled back. 12 times Michael died. And every single time, the death traced directly back to something James did or failed to do. A prescription he picked up with the wrong dosage. Equipment he forgot to inspect. A door he left unlocked. The universe was not just killing Michael. It was using James as the weapon. In his research notes, James developed a devastating theory. He called it temporal guilt displacement. He believed that in timelines where a tragedy must occur, the universe assigns responsibility to whoever tries hardest to prevent it. By fighting fate, James was not saving his brother. He was condemning him, over and over again. His final recorded entry is almost impossible to read. He wrote, "I am not saving him, I am killing him, every time, and I cannot stop trying." Then, hidden on the last page, a single paragraph. "I found a timeline where Michael lives, but I have to die before the hiking trip. It's the only way. Tomorrow, I'll know if it works." James Whitmore vanished in 2001. His body was never found. But here is the detail that makes this case truly haunting. Michael Whitmore is still alive today. He lives in Seattle. He has a family, a career, a full life. And according to every record that exists, Michael Whitmore was an only child. He has no memory of a twin brother, no photographs, no documents. James Whitmore, according to official history, never existed. Did James erase himself to save Michael? Did he succeed? And if he did, what does it mean to love someone so much that you delete yourself from existence just to let them live? If you're watching this far, you already know these cases only get darker. But 73% of you still are not subscribed. Do not miss what is coming next. Subscribe now. Number 6, the daughter who watched her parents die in 1,000 simulated timelines. What if you could see every possible future, every branching path your life could take? Now imagine using that power to find a single timeline where your parents survive, and imagine discovering that no such timeline exists. That is the nightmare Dr. Yuki Tanaka built for herself, and she may never have escaped it. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was a quantum computing researcher at a private institute in Osaka, Japan. She was considered one of the most brilliant minds of her generation, specializing in probability modeling and timeline simulation. Her work was abstract, theoretical, detached from emotion, until 2029. That was the year her parents boarded a commercial flight from Tokyo to Singapore. The plane suffered catastrophic mechanical failure over the Pacific Ocean. All 237 passengers were killed. Yuki's mother and father died somewhere over the water, surrounded by strangers, probably terrified, definitely alone. The grief nearly destroyed her. But Yuki was not the kind of person who accepted helplessness. She was a scientist, and scientists solve problems. Over the next 2 years, she poured every resource into developing a system she called the Arbiter. It was a quantum simulation engine capable of modeling causally complete alternate timelines. In simple terms, it could calculate what would happen if any variable in reality changed. Different choices, different outcomes, different worlds. In 2031, Yuki input the exact conditions of her parents' flight, the weather, the mechanical specifications, the passenger manifest, the departure time. Then she began running variations. What if they had taken a different flight? What if the plane had been inspected one more time? What if they had canceled the trip entirely? The arbiter ran over 1,000 simulations, and in every single one, her parents died. Different flight, hotel fire, canceled trip, taxi accident, delayed departure, sudden illness at the airport, earlier flight, runway collision. In one simulation, they never left their house. A gas leak killed them in their sleep. In another, they drove instead. A drunk driver crossed the median. The causes changed. The timing shifted slightly. But the outcome was always the same. Within 72 hours of the original crash, her parents were dead. Yuki documented everything in her research logs. At first, her entries were clinical, detached. But as the simulations accumulated, her writing changed. She began addressing her parents directly. She started apologizing to them. She wrote things like, "I watched you die again today. I'm so sorry. I thought this one would work." One entry stands out above all others. Yuki wrote, "The simulation does not predict death. It enforces it." She had discovered something terrifying. Certain deaths, she believed, were quantum locked, fixed points that existed across every possible branch of reality. No matter how many variables you changed, the outcome remained constant. Her parents were never meant to survive 2029. The universe had already decided. The psychological toll was catastrophic. Colleagues reported that Yuki stopped sleeping. She stopped eating. She spent every waking moment running more simulations, convinced that the next one would be different. She began talking to the simulations as if they were real, as if the digital versions of her parents could hear her. Her final research log entry was dated November 2031. It read, "I have run 1,247 branches. I have watched them die 1,247 times. I know now that they were never meant to survive." Then, a week later, a colleague received a strange message from Yuki. It said, "I found timeline 1,248. They survive, but I have to stay inside the simulation forever. I am not coming back." Dr. Yuki Tanaka has not published research since 2032. Her laboratory was closed. Her files were sealed. Colleagues who try to contact her receive no response. Did Yuki Tanaka escape into a digital timeline where her parents still live? Is she there right now, existing as data, choosing simulation over reality? Or is she still sitting somewhere in Osaka, running simulations, watching her parents die again and again, searching for a branch that does not exist? Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Yuki opened one, and she may never have found her way back. Number 5, the man who received letters from his future self. Imagine opening your mailbox and finding a letter addressed to you, written in your own handwriting, postmarked from 16 years in the future. Now imagine that letter contains a warning about how your wife is going to die. You follow every instruction perfectly, and she dies anyway. That is the curse Harold Finch lived with for 16 years. And the truth behind those letters is far more disturbing than you could possibly imagine. Harold Finch was a postal worker in Liverpool, England. He was 34 years old, married to a woman named Margaret, and father to 2 young children. His life was ordinary, predictable, safe, until January 1962, when a letter arrived that changed everything. The envelope was addressed to Harold in his own handwriting. The postmark read, March 1978. 16 years in the future. Inside, a single page warned him that Margaret would die in a gas explosion on March 3rd, 1962, unless he had their kitchen stove inspected immediately. The letter was signed, Harold, 1978. Harold was terrified. He called a repairman that same day. The stove was inspected, and a faulty valve was discovered and replaced. Margaret was safe. Harold burned the letter and tried to forget. But on March 5th, 2 days after the predicted date, Margaret collapsed in the kitchen. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the replacement part. She was dead before the ambulance arrived. More letters came, always from 1978, always warning about deaths, always signed in his own hand. The next letter warned that his son Thomas would be struck by a car on June 12, 1965. Harold kept Thomas home from school that entire week. But on June 14th, Thomas fell from his bicycle and scraped his knee. The wound became infected. He died of sepsis within days. Another letter warned about his daughter Elizabeth. A kidnapping attempt on September 8, 1969. Harold transferred her to a new school across the city. On September 10th, Elizabeth suffered a severe allergic reaction to something in the school cafeteria. She stopped breathing before teachers could help her. Harold followed every instruction. He changed every variable. And every single time, death found another way. Different cause, same window of time. The letters were not helping him prevent tragedy. They were ensuring he was close enough to witness it. Harold began keeping a journal. He documented every letter, every warning, every failed attempt to save his family. And slowly, a horrifying realization took shape in his mind. He wrote, "The future version of me does not want to save them. He wants me to suffer. He wants me to watch." The final letter arrived in 1977. It was different from the others, shorter, almost apologetic. It read, "I'm sorry, you will understand soon. There was never another way." In March 1978, Harold Finch died of heart failure. His body was found in his study, surrounded by hundreds of letters, every warning he had ever received, every death he had failed to prevent. Postal analysts examined the letters and found something impossible. The ink, the paper, the materials all matched products available only in the 1970s. But the earliest letters had arrived in 1962. They should not have existed yet. Hidden in his journal, investigators found a final entry. Harold had written, "I think I understand now. I sent the letters. I will send them. I have already sent them. The loop has no beginning." What does that mean? Did Harold Finch somehow become the author of his own suffering? Was he trapped in a closed loop, receiving warnings from a future self who had already failed, who had always failed, who would always fail? Did he spend 16 years following instructions that he himself would eventually write, knowing they would never work? Some believe Harold was a victim of a temporal paradox, a man caught in a circle with no origin and no escape. Others believe something far darker, that the letters were never meant to save anyone, that they were designed to maximize pain, to ensure Harold witnessed every loss from the closest possible distance. The loop has no beginning, and perhaps, for Harold Finch, it has no end. We are only halfway through, and the cases ahead are even more disturbing. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. You will not want to miss what comes next. Number 4. The time agent who had to let his family die. Imagine being given an impossible choice: save humanity or save your mother. Now imagine choosing humanity, and then being forced to watch your mother fade from existence, knowing you are the reason she will never be born. That is exactly what happened to an operative known only as Solomon, and the classified document that tells his story will chill you to the bone. In 2024, a strange file appeared on an encrypted server. No one knows who uploaded it or where it came from. The document was dated 2038 and bore the seal of an organization called the Temporal Integrity Division. According to the file, this agency operates in the mid-21st century with a single purpose: protecting the timeline from catastrophic alterations. Their agents do not prevent disasters. They ensure that certain events happen exactly as they must, even the terrible ones. Solomon was recruited in 2042. His real name was redacted from the file, replaced with his operational code. He was described as an ideal candidate, psychologically resilient, no strong emotional attachments, willing to make difficult decisions. He was assigned to Causal Enforcement, a division responsible for eliminating threats to timeline stability before they can cause damage. His first mission seemed straightforward. A scientist in the early 21st century would eventually develop technology capable of ending human civilization. The research was still decades away, but the funding that made it possible came from a single source: an investor who wrote one check in 1987. Solomon's mission was simple: ensure that investor never writes that check, ensure he dies before the transaction occurs. Solomon traveled back to 1987. He located the target. He studied the man's routine, and then he discovered something that shattered him. The investor was his maternal grandfather. If his grandfather died in 1987, his mother would never be born. And if his mother was never born, Solomon himself would cease to exist. The mission required him to erase his own family from history. The document explains a concept called causal shielding. Operatives on active missions are temporarily protected from paradox. They can complete their tasks before the timeline catches up to them. But once the mission ends, dissolution begins. The agent fades, their history unravels, everything they were disappears. Solomon completed the mission. He staged an accident. His grandfather died on a rainy Tuesday in November 1987, and then Solomon watched. He watched his mother's history rewrite itself. He visited his childhood home and found a parking lot. He searched for records of his own birth and found nothing. He stood in the city where he grew up and realized that no one had ever heard his name. He was becoming a ghost, a man with memories of a life that no longer existed. His final transmission was recorded in the document. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. He said, "Timeline secured, beginning dissolution. I can see them fading. I can feel myself forgetting who I loved." But the most chilling detail comes at the end of the file. A single line in cold bureaucratic language. Operative Solomon successfully completed 14 familial erasure missions before full temporal dissolution. Commendation recommended. 14 missions. 14 times. Solomon was sent back to kill someone connected to his own bloodline. His grandfather, his uncle, a cousin, a great-aunt. Each mission erased another branch of his family tree. Each mission brought him closer to total non-existence. And he did it willingly. Because someone had to. The final page of the document lists Solomon's original name. The name he had before he became an operative. Before he became a ghost. The name has been redacted, blacked out completely, except for 2 letters visible at the edge of the ink. JW. Who was Solomon? Who was JW? And how many other agents are out there right now, traveling through time, erasing their own families to protect a future they will never see? Somewhere, in a timeline that no longer exists, Solomon had a mother who loved him, a childhood home, a history. Now he is nothing more than a code name in a classified file, a file that should not exist, describing a man who, according to every record, never did. Number 3, the woman who lived her husband's death every night. Imagine falling asleep beside the person you love. Now imagine waking up in a different world where they are still alive. You spend hours with them. You hold them. You hear their voice, and then you watch them die. Every single night. For 7 years. That is the reality Clara Vance has been living since 2017, and her story is one of the most heartbreaking cases we have ever encountered. Clara Vance was a nurse in Savannah, Georgia. She had been married to her husband Thomas for 12 years. They had built a quiet, beautiful life together. No children, but they had each other, and that was enough. Thomas was her best friend, her anchor, the person who made every day feel meaningful. On October 15, 2017, Thomas collapsed in their kitchen. A brain aneurysm, no warning signs, no symptoms. One moment he was pouring coffee, and the next he was on the floor. Clara performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, but Thomas was pronounced dead at the hospital. He was 41 years old. Clara never got to say goodbye. 3 weeks after the funeral, something strange began happening. Clara would fall asleep in her bed in Savannah and wake up somewhere else. A different house, a different city, a different version of her life. But Thomas was always there, alive, smiling, unaware that anything was wrong. At first, Clara thought she was dreaming, grief dreams, her mind trying to cope with the loss. But these experiences were too vivid, too detailed, too real. She could smell his cologne, feel the warmth of his skin, hear the exact pitch of his laugh. And every single time, within hours of her arrival, Thomas would die. Heart attack, stroke, car accident, house fire, mugging gone wrong, anaphylactic shock. The causes were always different. The timing was always the same. Clara would spend a few precious hours with him, and then she would watch him slip away. Again, and again, and again. She began documenting everything in journals that now span hundreds of pages, over 2,500 entries. each one describing a different timeline, a different version of their life together, a different way Thomas died. Some entries are clinical, detached, others are barely legible, the handwriting shaking with grief. A neurologist who examined Clara found something extraordinary. During REM sleep, her brain showed activity patterns unlike anything in medical literature. Regions associated with memory, spatial navigation, and temporal processing were lighting up simultaneously, almost as if her consciousness was navigating through something. Clara called it sliding. She believed she was not dreaming at all, she was traveling. Her theory was devastating in its implications. She believed her consciousness had become untethered from a single timeline. Every night, she slid into a reality where Thomas still existed, and every night she was forced to watch him leave again. Not because she was imagining it, but because every version of Thomas across every possible world was destined to die. In one interview, Clara said something that still haunts researchers who studied her case. She said, "I have held him as he died more times than I can count. I know exactly what his last breath sounds like. I have heard it 2,500 times. But in 2023, something changed. Clara reported a night unlike any other. She slid into a timeline and found Thomas alive, as always. But this time, when she looked at him, he looked back differently. He studied her face. And then he said 4 words that made her blood run cold. 'You found me.' Clara woke up before she could respond. She has been trying to find that timeline ever since. Every night, she falls asleep hoping to return to the world where Thomas recognized her. The world where he somehow knew she had been searching. So far, she has not found it. Clara Vance is still out there, still sliding, still watching the man she loves die in every world she visits, still searching for the one timeline where he lives, where he remembers, where she can finally stay. Some people believe Clara is cursed. Others believe she is connected to every version of Thomas across the multiverse. But one thing is certain, her grief has no end, because every night it starts over. Number 2, the child who remembered his family's deaths across 6 lifetimes. Imagine being 6 years old. Imagine waking up every night not from nightmares, but from memories. Memories of watching your parents die, not once. Not in one life, but in 6 different lifetimes, 6 different centuries, 6 different ways. That is what a little boy named Daniel Reyes claimed he experienced. And the details he provided were so accurate, so impossible, that psychologists still cannot explain them. Daniel Reyes was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 1997. By all accounts, he was a normal child, quiet, thoughtful, loved by his parents. But in 2003, when Daniel was 6 years old, his parents brought him to a child psychologist. He had been waking up in the middle of the night, sobbing uncontrollably. But these were not ordinary nightmares. Daniel was not frightened. He was grieving. When the psychologist asked Daniel what he saw in his dreams, the boy gave an answer that changed everything. He said he was remembering lives he had lived before, and in every single one, his parents died while he watched. The first memory Daniel described took place in the 1840s. He said his name was Mateo. His parents were killed during political violence in rural Argentina. Soldiers came to their home. Daniel hid under a bed and watched through a crack as his mother and father were dragged outside. He heard the gunshots. He never saw them again. The second memory was from the 1920s, somewhere in Europe. His name was Heinrich. His parents died in a house fire. Daniel remembered standing outside in the snow, watching the flames consume everything. He remembered screaming for them. He remembered no one coming. The third memory was America in the 1960s. His name was Michael. His parents were killed in a car accident. Daniel was in the back seat. He survived the crash. They did not. He remembered the smell of gasoline and the silence that followed. The fourth memory was Japan in the 1980s. His name was Kenji. An earthquake collapsed their apartment building. Daniel was trapped beside their bodies for 2 days before rescuers found him. The fifth memory was Africa in the 1990s. His name was Samuel. His parents were killed during a civil conflict. Strangers carried him away while the village burned behind them. The sixth memory was his current life. Daniel told the psychologist that his parents were going to die soon. He did not know how, but he knew it was coming. It always came. The psychologists were stunned. Daniel described historical events with accuracy far beyond what any 6-year-old could know. He described clothing, architecture, and languages from eras he had never studied. He even knew his birthday in each life. And here is the chilling detail. Every single birthday fell on the same date, September 22nd. When asked why this kept happening, Daniel gave an answer that haunted everyone who heard it. He said, "I think I am supposed to watch. I think someone is making me see it so I learn something, but I do not know what." The psychologists filed their reports. The case was quietly circulated among researchers. And then, in 2009, the unthinkable happened. Daniel was 12 years old, sitting in his classroom at school, when he suddenly began to cry. His teacher asked what was wrong. Daniel could not answer. He just kept sobbing, staring at the clock. At that exact moment, across the city, a gas explosion destroyed his family's home. Both of his parents were killed instantly. Daniel knew. Before anyone told him, before the news arrived, he already knew. Daniel Reyes is now in his late 20s. He refuses to speak about his experiences. Those who know him say he has never fully recovered, and every year, on September 22nd, he does not sleep. He stays awake all night, sitting in silence, waiting for something no one else can see. Is Daniel Reyes cursed to watch his parents die in every lifetime? Is he being punished, tested, taught? And if so, by whom? What lesson could possibly require so much suffering? Some souls, it seems, are not allowed to rest. Some souls are forced to remember. And some souls carry grief that spans centuries. Number 1, the traveler who has watched humanity end. We saved the most disturbing case for last. Imagine living for 10,000 years. Imagine being born into a family, loving them, watching them grow, and then watching them die as the world collapses around you. Now, imagine doing that again. And again. Across countless timelines, countless apocalypses, countless families. That is the existence of a figure known only as the Witness. And his testimony is the most haunting account of time travel ever recorded. In 2019, a post appeared on an obscure physics forum. The author provided no name, no location, no identifying information. He called himself only the Witness, and what he described defied everything we think we know about time, death, and human suffering. The Witness claimed he had been traveling through timelines for over 10,000 years. He did not control when he shifted. He did not choose where he went. He simply lived. And when civilization collapsed, when everyone around him died, he would wake up again in a new timeline, born into a new family, with full memories of everyone he had ever lost. He described the collapses in devastating detail: nuclear war, pandemic, climate catastrophe, artificial intelligence turning against its creators, asteroid impact, resource wars that left nothing but ash and silence. He had seen humanity end in every way imaginable, and in every single timeline, he watched his family die. His post contained a passage that made readers stop breathing. He wrote, "I have had over 400 children across all my lifetimes. I have watched every single one of them die, some in my arms, some from a distance, some before I could even say goodbye. I remember all of their names. I remember all of their faces, and I carry them with me into every new world." The Witness explained that he had tried everything. He had hidden his families in bunkers. He had fought against the forces that brought collapse. He had tried to accelerate technology to escape the planet. He had tried to slow progress to prevent the disasters. Nothing worked. The end always came. His family always died, and he always continued. He developed a theory about himself. He believed he was a fixed point in the universe, a constant that could not be erased. He wrote, "I think the universe needs a witness, someone to remember every collapse, every failure, every scream, someone to carry the weight of all that loss so that it is not forgotten." The existential horror of his existence is almost incomprehensible. He cannot die. He cannot stop. He cannot look away. Every bond he forms becomes another wound. Every child he raises becomes another grave. Every love becomes another loss. And yet, he keeps living, keeps feeling, keeps remembering. Near the end of his post, the Witness wrote something that sent chills through everyone who read it. He said, "I am not looking for help. There is no help. I just wanted someone to know that I have seen it all, every end, every loss, and it never stops hurting. After 10,000 years, the grief is exactly as sharp as the first time. The final paragraph contained a warning. The witness wrote, "I think you are in timeline 7341. Based on the current trajectory, you have about 12 years before the first collapse event. I will be there when it happens. I always am." The post was deleted within hours. No archive exists except scattered screenshots. No one knows who the witness is. No one knows if he is real. But some people noticed a detail that haunts them to this day. The post was made in 2019. 12 years from 2019 is 2031. We are getting closer. If the witness is real, he is somewhere right now, living a life, raising a family, loving people who do not know what is coming. He knows exactly how they will die. He knows exactly when the sky will fall. And when the end comes, he will watch. He always watches. And then he will begin again. Some men are cursed to forget. The witness is cursed to remember. Forever. 10 travelers, 10 tragedies, 10 prisons made of time itself. Each of them tried to save the people they loved. Each of them failed. Some of them are still out there, reliving the same loss, watching the same deaths, trapped in loops they cannot escape. If time travel is real, then perhaps it isn't a gift at all. Perhaps it's a curse. Only 30% of viewers are subscribed. Join now before the next video drops. Which case disturbed you the most? Let us know in the comments. And remember, some doors once opened can never be closed.